Hi there, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host, Simon Conboy. With me today, we've got Dan.
Hello.
So, as I'm sure you guys are well aware, an absolute ton of stuff has happened in the last 2 weeks. Really should have done one last week. Could have went over the Combine and done a bit more of a preview for the insanity that has been the last couple of days. But alas, we didn't. So what can you do? I do want to just go over a couple of bits from the Combine, but very, very quickly because we do have a lot of stuff to get through. Dan, have you paid any attention to any of the stuff from the Combine at all?
I don't really put any stock in the Combine, so no.
Okay, well, I'll go over a couple of bits and my thoughts on them and see what you think. Did you get any inclination as to what Saquon Barkley's numbers were? You know, the running back everyone's drooling over.
I'm guessing stupid.
Yeah, they were ridiculous. So he ran a 4.440 at 235 pounds, which is the fastest they've had anyone ever run over 230. He had a better jump than Julio, vertical. A better broad jump than I think AJ Green or someone ridiculous, and he was faster than Antonio Brown.
So basically, what you're telling me is he's been set up to be a draft bust.
You know, like a couple of years ago when Clowney turned up and just everyone was like, yeah, they're a freak. That was basically it. Confirmed he's definitely the top prospect in the draft. As well as that, people going nuts about Josh Allen because he threw the ball like 80 yards, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who watched him on film. And if you've watched this show, you've heard me talk about what a ridiculous arm this kid has. But yeah, apparently he was taking the mick a little bit during the drills when they had to throw deep. You know, normally they have to take a certain step, drop, and then throw it as soon as they're there. Now, because of his arm strength, he was able to like take his drop, stand there for a couple of seconds, and throw it late just to show off his arm strength.
Yeah, it's taking the piss a bit. But again,
well, when you're prompting Mayock to say it's the second best arm he's ever seen.
Yeah, but at the same time, throwing it that far is great and everything.
Yeah, well, you've got to bear in mind who that first arm is.
Which is?
Jamarcus Russell.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all well and good having the arm, but
if you don't have the accuracy to back it up.
Well, I've been saying ever since we've been talking, you know, before last season began, last college season, he was one of the prospects that was always going to be highly thought of because of his, not just his arm, he's also, you know, athletic. If he was to flesh out a bit, he'd be a big dude. You know, in terms of if you were to build a quarterback from the ground up, he can do everything. It's just played at a really small college. I don't think he'll be ready for a year or two, but we'll see what happens. So for me, those were the sort of the two big stories, and then the kid with the arm the amputated arm. He turns out he's really athletic, but he's unfortunate because not just the arm issue, but he's kind of a tweener. So he'll probably fall in the draft and not go very high, and people will be like, "Oh, but he did really well," and just be like, "Yeah, but even if like the arm thing isn't even the biggest issue, it's the fact that he's like not really got a position. He's that horrible middle ground between being a cornerback and a linebacker. So, yeah, you never want to be a tweener. But really, it just confirmed quarterbacks are going to be, I think, the focal point of the early portion of this year's draft. DBs look good. The interior of the O-line looks good. Speaking of QBs, that's where we're going to start. What quarterback situation do you want to go through first, Dan?
Dealer's choice, really. There's too many. So I don't know.
Well, we'll start with, I suppose, the most obvious in Minnesota. So all three of their quarterbacks from last year not under contract. Every single one of them has moved on and found pastures new. But they got, we can safely say, the biggest prize in free agency, right? In Cousins.
In terms of QB, yes, most definitely. And
I think that makes him the big surprise by default, does it?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Or at least this year, anyway.
And the monetary side of it is absolutely insane. It is a contract I have never seen.
No, he's basically gone and got himself an NBA contract.
Yeah,
I've never seen a. Yeah, I've never seen a fully guaranteed NFL contract. It's 3 years. Is it 87 mil? Just looking for the numbers now. I believe that's what it was. Either way, he's now not just like it's all guaranteed, but he's also he's getting paid just a bit less, I believe, on a yearly basis than Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
And also, who would have thought, like, before last season began, that we'd be heading into the following season with Jimmy Garoppolo and Kirk Cousins as the two highest paid players in the league?
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone saw that coming. I mean, I don't know. The thing that is it got to come down to, is it worth the money? Now, Cousins doesn't care either way. It's guaranteed money, which kind of, makes it obvious what the Vikings' mindset is over the next year or two.
Well, it's been that way for a while, because it was like that when they traded for Bradford when Bridgewater initially got hurt. The reason they made that deal was because they thought that was a team that was ready to compete. And I think that's more true now than it was back then.
Oh yeah, but this, I mean, talking about the whole Kirk Cousins thing. The thing is, this story goes one of two ways. Either he becomes immortalized in Minnesota forever, or it goes the Albert Hainsworth way of being the most reviled man in Minnesota. So
I don't know if we see that. Like, I think for a quarterback to get that level of lazy is pretty rare.
No, it is, but
again, and Cousins doesn't seem like that kind of guy. I
don't know how many Vikings fans bothered to keep up with the with Kirk Cousins' game tape. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's very good, and he's.
You're certainly a fan of his.
Yes, I've been saying this since the start of last season, where I said at the end of the season I do want him to sign with the Cardinals. But I know what I was getting myself in for is he's a chancer. He will force the ball into windows that he shouldn't be forcing it into, and you'll probably lose 1 or 2 games because of it. Is he worth the money? Depends. I mean, the quarterback market at the moment around the league is not looking great. I think more teams than not are still looking for the solution at the quarterback position. But I don't think time will tell if he's worth the money. I'm willing to bet he probably isn't worth the guarantees.
Well, I look at it a simple way, and that's: do you think in this 3-year window, assuming that he stays healthy and this supporting cast stays together, are they a contender for those 3 years?
I don't know, because it's difficult to tell. I mean, it's all good picking him up and seeing that he's got some of the pieces around him.
He definitely does. I mean, the weapon's there.
Yeah, but it's going to come down to the chemistry. And if it all clicks, I mean, he's going from one scheme to another. He's got to be able to connect with his wide receivers well enough to be a fairly dominant force. And for 87 million, you're hoping he's going to become a dominant force.
86 million, it turns out.
Oh, well, at this level, we're talking, there's pennies. But, I don't know. I think it probably will work out. I mean, the Vikings coaching staff know what they're doing.
But yes or no? Are you on the? Would you hedge towards they're going to be a contender for these 3 years?
Or no. No.
So that would suggest to me,
man. This is the NFL. The gods of football will look down upon them and go, "Good job," and then strike them down for their hubris.
But if Cousins, as he said he wanted to go to a competitor, he's gone to the best team. That was an option.
Yeah,
I think that's safe to say.
Gone to the best team.
But I think they are like if they could have the success they had last year with Case Keenum, I think Cousins is a more proven version of Keenum. We've seen Cousins do it. It's not been great, but at a level around what Keenum was doing it last year for the last 3 years.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I agree with that. It's just I don't see them remaining competitive for 3 years for one reason or another. I don't know. It's just one of those things. I mean, it's a lot of pieces to try and keep together over 3 years to remain competitive.
Oh yeah, it's just if they do, I think it's the deal that makes the most sense for Cousins, for the Vikings. By this point, I don't think they really had another alternative. I don't like the fact it's fully guaranteed. I think that's a worrying precedent. I'm surprised the team was willing to go there, but we'll see how it works out. One thing's for sure, the Vikes are going to be one of the favourites in the NFC next year, and they're going to have a lot of pressure and some very high expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the one advantage as well of signing Cousins among all the other QBs you could have signed is he's coming from a division in the NFC East with a good plethora of quarterbacks that he has to compete with year in, year out. Obviously, you've got at least when he.
Oh, he's going to one where that's pretty much the case.
Well, yeah,
Stafford has become a really high quality player.
That. I mean, normally you'd say, can he?
And that guy in Green Bay is quite good.
Yeah, I've heard he's quite good as well. That guy in Green Bay. Forget his name now. Won a Super Bowl, But I mean, as far as being competitive within the division, QB, in QB matchup, he's definitely got what it takes coming from the NFC.
Yeah, and with the team around him,
and the team around him allows him to do that, and he's got that defense to bail him out should there be a need. Something Washington was severely lacking in last year.
One of the key things I think is this Vikings team. Okay, the 3 years it may look quite different, after next season, even the roster, but for next year, it's pretty much the same group.
Yeah, I think a key component will be whoever the running back is.
Oh, if Dalvin Cook comes back healthy, he was superb until he got hurt. They've still got Latavius Murray, played well, backing him up. Yeah. They should be. Well, there's no real key pieces leaving Minnesota this offseason.
It's going to be a hard-fought division. I mean, the Vikings are going to have a tough schedule next year just because of where they placed. So,
for them next season, if they don't make the playoffs, it'll be seen as a massive failure.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Other teams in the Cousins sweepstakes have missed out, so I'm sure they had to do some scrambling once that decision was made, which it sounds like it had been made for a while, especially based on when some of these teams made their decisions to sign guys, because the first of these dominoes to fall in terms of the QBs was actually Case Keenum.
Yes, went to Denver.
He has indeed, and I believe that's also a $3 million deal. How much was that one?
I mean, to be honest, though, it makes sense. Denver is, I suppose, what's the polite way of putting it? Severely lacking at talent, I suppose.
Offensively, they're very lacking. Yeah, that would be safe.
I'm just talking about the quarterback position.
Oh yeah.
So he's definitely an upgrade regardless. They just have to build around him. Elway should be able to do that, I imagine, either through the draft or through whatever remains of the free agents, even though we're not technically in free agency as of yet.
Here we are. 2-year deal, $36 million.
Yeah, I think that's a fair price. Speaking of which, I would have much preferred to get him over who the Cardinals did get, but we'll get onto that in a second. No, I like Case Keenum. I actually liked him when he played for the Rams the year before last. And I think at this point he is a fairly proven product. You know what you're getting with him. Whether or not last year was a fluke with the Vikings, we'll see this year in Denver.
I'm inclined to think it was he overperformed. Had just a bit of luck. I think the one thing he doesn't get enough credit for, though, and we've spoke about this quite a lot, and it will definitely show up in Denver because their O-line is bad, is his ability to evade players in the pocket.
Yes,
and be successful in the scramble drill, because I didn't know he had that kind of ability.
No, I didn't either. He is one of the most elusive QBs I've actually seen in quite some time, and it came out of bloody nowhere. And the Vikings O-line's not terrible. I mean, the Denver was.
It's not great.
It's not great, but I think it makes, again, one of the reasons I wish he came to Arizona is his ability to play under pressure. He is very good at it. He's good at avoiding it. He's good at stepping up, and he's good in the old scramble drill and rolling out. So he actually lends more to a play action type offense than you'd think. Because all the movement all the time, he's really hard to lock down.
The issue for the Broncos, though, is they're picking 5th. And Keenum doesn't preclude, like, had they gone Cousins, that would suggest to me not going QB. Keenum, though, doesn't preclude that, especially with it only being a 2-year deal.
No, I don't know. I mean, there are better prospects to pick up, better ideas to pick up, like build the offense around him, and hope he holds on for 2 years at least.
Well, they could always hope Paxton Lynch continues. He's shown nothing. I think a lot of people probably forget Paxton Lynch was a first-round pick for him a couple of years ago. At QB, maybe they'll try and use him as a bridge, get some more tack. Because the Broncos offense, Keenum is not in a position to succeed like he was in Minnesota.
Well, no, he doesn't have the receivers or the running back.
He's got 2. Demaryius Thomas and Sanders are fine, but he's not got much else. He's got a substandard line and a poor run game.
Yeah, I think this just falls into the category of we'll see. I mean, it's not like the AFC West is particularly competitive at the moment, so I don't think it matters all that much.
I mean, it could be. I'd say that's a division in flux. We don't know what the Raiders are going to be next year with Gruden. The Chiefs have made a lot of changes, and we'll be talking about them in a little bit because they've got some new faces. And the Chargers, I mean, who knows with the Chargers? They'll look good on paper again, and who knows? So I think that division is somewhat open. Keenum, it just feels like it's a bridge to something else, and the fact that they're only, it's only a 2-year deal would suggest that to me. I think it's going to be tough for him to replicate what he did last year. I don't think he's that and I think it'll be similar for Cousins. I think it might take him a little while in Minnesota as well, but it's just he's got a lot more help. I mean, this Broncos team, I look at them at the minute, having lost Talib, even with that defense, they look like a kind of 6-10, 7-9 team. And to be honest, Cousins feels like a quarterback of that kind of team. So I can understand why they've done it. They had to do something. That fan base wasn't going to accept trotting out Trevor Siemian or Brock Osweiler. Hopefully, we never have to see Brock Osweiler again. But you never know. It's a strange league. The Broncos still a big question mark for me for the long term at this QB spot. But we'll move on to one of the other teams that lost out in this sweepstakes, and that would be your Arizona Cardinals. So they've given Sam Bradford, another former Viking, a 1-year, $20 million deal with $15 million guaranteed, which is kind of the going rate for a quarterback. So
basically, they're paying him $15 million to sit in the injury box.
Yeah, probably. I suspect behind your offensive line to play for 4 weeks, maybe go 2-2, and then go on IR.
Yeah, the guy's made of glass. I don't know why we bothered signing him. I'd rather have Keenum. I do not have high hopes for this pick. He has never, since day one, showed me anything even close to, I quite like this guy. I want him on my team.
I don't know. Against the Saints last year, that was one of the best QB performances we saw.
It doesn't matter. It was one game. You know, anyone can have a good one game.
He's had moments. It's just the inability to stay healthy has just been, up there with any player in league history. It's just teams like him enough, and his film is for the most part good enough that he just keeps getting these opportunities.
Well,
I'm not sure this is the best spot for him, though.
no, but we were probably the only team willing to pay for him. Yes.
Your mic cut out there.
Oh no, I said we were probably the only team willing to pay for him.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. You're sort of jumping in and out.
Odd.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I remember someone suggesting, I can't remember what I was listening to, but I think there's a valid point that actually with having Larry Fitzgerald come back for a year, perhaps in Arizona, it's maybe slowed them down from hitting the rebuild button because it feels like that's kind of needed at this point. But, the face of the franchise, probably the biggest legend the franchise has had, they just go, maybe just give it a go for another year and see what happens. And that's how this looks. Word is they've also made an offer to Mike Glennon, so he'll possibly get to play, knowing Bradford's injury history. And as we've said, the state of the Cardinals' offensive line. John Brown's gone, so the receiver position's awfully thin. It is just Fitzgerald and David Johnson, who are both great talents, but beyond them, tough group. The Cardinals just feel like they're a team that's in transition right now. I can't say I expect too much coming from this team next year.
no.
Other teams. Who else was in? The Jets. So the Jet. It seems like everyone. So the Vikings won the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes, and all three of their QBs have gone to teams that were also in the sort of final round of that bidding. So the Jets have got Josh McCown on a 10 mil deal for next year, which I think is a good deal. He was really, really good last year for the Jets before he got hurt. So I think Jets fans will be fine with seeing him come back for a year. Again, this is a team expected to go for a QB high up in the draft this year, having missed out on Cousins. But they also signed Teddy Bridgewater. Haven't got much idea as to what the contract there may be. Bridgewater, for me, is the biggest question mark of the whole QB class in free agency this year. The severity of that knee injury, I don't know what to expect from him. I think the upside's potentially really high, but there's also the possibility that he'll never be the same player. So for the Jets, I feel like they're kind of in a holding position. We'll see who they draft, and if McCown can play as well as he did last year, they're in good hands for this year. Other than that, QB position, the Browns, they've changed things up. They have shipped off DeShone Kizer to Green Bay, straight up player exchange. You don't see these too often for Demarius Randall, which is a good move for the Browns. They needed defensive back help.
It basically robbed the Packers.
Well, it means the Packers have a talented developmental backup. That it says to me that there must have been plans to get rid of Randall at some point in the near future, if not this year, next year, and maybe just try and get something for him. Kaiser's got some talent, I think. He's only like 22, sitting behind Aaron Rodgers. You never know. I think the move makes sense for both teams, but definitely for the Browns. Then they went and got what I'm going to assume will be their quarterback for this season, or at least the first half of it, in Tyrod Taylor from the Bills, which felt like it was going to be inevitable at some point. Because the Bills, have you ever seen a team be less committal to their starting quarterback than they have to to Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo for the last few years.
Yeah, well, there's that whole thing in the middle of the season where they benched him, lost a load of games, and he came back and he won a few games. It was strange. Although in all fairness, the one game where all he had to do was pull off a win, he couldn't do diddly poo, and they lost against. They lost in the playoffs. So
thus
begins another 10-year drought.
Well, one of the big questions I think with Taylor is that there's two really interesting aspects of his time in Buffalo for me. And it's a question of you didn't see much improvement from him. And does that come down to him or the personnel around him? Now, we know they've had a fairly talented O-line and LaShawn McCoy. And both of those elements have been one of the best running attacks for the last 2 or 3 years, which Taylor absolutely does contribute to with his own ability to scramble, needing to be respected. But the passing attack, he's not had great personnel around him, or has it been that he's not good enough to get the most out of them? He certainly doesn't take chances. He doesn't throw many picks. But he can throw the ball really well. But then sometimes he doesn't look like he knows how to play the position. I've talked about this at length before, actually. I did an episode on him last year. It's tough. And frankly, we'll just talk about the Browns and their many trades kind of here while we're here, because it all does kind of tie in. So for this, the Bills are getting a 3rd-round pick. They made another trade. They traded their left tackle, Cordy Glenn, who's a very good player, to the Bengals in order to exchange 1st-round picks. So now, and they also got a 3rd-round pick for Tyrod Taylor. So the Bills are now in a position where they've got the number 12, the 11 or 12 pick, I can't remember which, a pick in the early 20s, and 2 3rd-rounders, and I believe they might even have 2 2nd-rounders. The word is that the Browns are, not the Browns, the Bills are looking to trade up into the top 5 to get their quarterback this year, which is quite similar to how the Eagles got Carson Wentz a couple of years ago. It should make sense because the Bills have absolutely nobody at this point.
No, who is the quarterback in Buffalo now?
That Nathan Peterman guy who threw 5 picks in 1 half against the Chargers. That guy.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe
they're targeting one in the draft, but they're picking quite high.
Yeah, they are. No, that's why I was just saying. The Bills are now picking 11th and 22nd, but they've also got 2 3rd-rounders, and they might also have 2 seconds. The word is they're going to trade into the top 5.
So who are they going to go for quarterback-wise?
One of the rookies.
Well, it's a draft. I would assume they're all rookies. I meant, which one?
Oh, in free agent, like now?
Oh, yeah, if they draft a QB.
They'd have to put that QB out there at this point or go with Peterman, because the options in there are no real options in free agency at this point.
No, I know. It's just if they're gonna trade up in the draft to get one.
Yeah.
Which draft prospect do you think they're going to be going after?
Oh, well, I suspect in terms of the position, I think they'd trade up 2. I think it would be number 3, because I think the Colts would be looking at being 100% open for business in trading down, because let's face it, that Colts team needs a ton of help.
Which is,
I think that's the spot. I think
the Colts need a team.
Yeah, I think that's where they go. I would see the Bills going for Darnold, to be honest, but that's just kind of down to my personal preference. I think Darnold for a lot of picks in college, but I think he's young, and I think that he's the guy who's probably going to impress teams the most when they talk to him. But I wouldn't. This is the year where I would not be happy if I was a fan of a team to make a trade up for any of these guys, because if you're picking there already, fair enough, but I don't like giving up potentially a lot of talented players for one quarterback that, for me, none of them are top 10 talents this year. Maybe Rosen, but I don't like any of them enough. But I would suspect it'd be him, possibly Allen, because of all the physical tools. But back to Cleveland as well. So that's kind of the Browns losing Cordy Glenn as well. I was going to come on here and say, they look like they're a team looking to rebuild, but we said that about them last year, and they did quite well. But it does look like they're rebuilding. They've also re-signed Carl Williams for the billionth time, which is great. He's an icon of the franchise. Still a great run stuffer even at his age. So good to see he'll be coming back. And they're bringing Starlo Tulele in as well. So they're going to have two big old bodies at the defensive tackle position. I don't have the numbers on that. Tulele, a good run stuffer. Not much more than that. I think he was a bit of a disappointment for the Panthers generally. But I'm sure he'll be a welcome addition after losing Marcel Darius last year. But yeah, the Browns, they're in a really interesting spot now because they've also got Jarvis Landry off of the Dolphins, who've also been very active for a 4th rounder this year and a 7th next year, which I think is great value for the Browns.
Oh yeah.
They're going to have to pay him a lot of money. It sounds like, especially when you look at the receiver market, which I guess I'll go over this now while we're talking Landry. So Landry wants in the range of sort of, I was under the impression, like low end number 1 money. So like between 12 and 15 mil a year.
Yeah, which isn't asking too much.
Well, the theory is that it is for a slot receiver, but then you see what happened this offseason. So we have had the first big receiving contract went to Mike Evans, which is a different situation. Mike Evans, top 10 pick, and your prototypical number 1 type receiver, and he's put up number 1 receiver type numbers most seasons he's been in the league. He got a 5-year, $82 million deal with 55 mil guaranteed. So that's where you're looking at that sort of 16 mil a year, number 1 type money. I believe he's the 2nd highest paid receiver in the league now, behind Antonio Brown. But for the Bucks, they don't really have much choice here. You got Odell Beckham coming up. He's going to get similar kind of number. You'd have to think. I think Beckham's probably going to want to be the number 1 guy in the league. So that was kind of in the area I expected it. But then things went crazy. And this is where I think this new period of signings is interesting, in that we've got Sammy Watkins is going to the Chiefs on a 3-year, $48 million deal with 30 mil guaranteed. They're paying Sammy Watkins, who, bear in mind, Landry and Watkins came into the league the same draft. Watkins was the number 4 overall pick. Has had 1,000-yard season. Last year was on a very good Rams team and only put up just under 600 yards.
Yeah.
Whereas Landry has led the league in reception since he was drafted. Has gone over 1,000 yards a couple of times. Doesn't score many touchdowns, but is very reliable and productive. And he stays healthy, whereas Watkins has been the definition of unreliable. So when I look at that kind of contract, I don't think it's unreasonable to pay Jarvis Landry around 10 mil a year. I mean, Watkins is guaranteed that at the moment. And I'd rather have Jarvis Landry than Sammy Watkins.
Oh, most definitely. I've never liked Sammy Watkins as a receiver.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out again.
Oh, bloody hell.
I don't know what your mic is up to today. It's not behaving itself. But, I mean, the Chiefs have certainly gone for an interesting style of offense. They're clearly going to be a team looking to throw the ball deep next year with the combination of Watkins and Hill.
Oh, an Andy Reid team passing. Never heard of it.
Huh?
I said an Andy Reid team passing. Never heard of it.
Yeah. Who would have thunk it? But yeah, I think the Browns I think got a lot better, without really having to give up too much. With Landry there now, if Josh Gordon can just be an actual NFL player rather than an idiot who plays in the NFL, and they might get Terrell Pryor back. If they get Saquon Barkley, that's a really talented offense.
Potentially.
And I suspect they will get Saquon Barkley. I think this Taylor move, I think he's a nice, safe quarterback to have for next season. He won't go 0-16, whether you think he's the answer or not. They'll win a game with him. And although whether that will be enough for Hugh Jackson, we're not sure. But then at 4, they can get a QB there if they need to, which they kind of do. But I think that would be a better option for them because Barkley is just that talented, or even Chubb, actually, the defensive end. I think that would be reasonable, pairing Bradley Chubb and Myles Garrett on the defensive side. So they've got some flexibility. I think they're a much, much better team. Actually, looking to use those picks to acquire players that can contribute now, I think is a good idea for this team. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to make any bold predictions with the Browns like I did last year, where I said there was a possibility they'd sneak into the playoffs if things fell right for them. That was not one of my prouder moments, prediction-wise, to say the least. No, but I mean, yeah, but we'll stick with the receiver theme while we're here. So the Browns, I like what they've done so far. I think they're in a much better spot than they were last year. The Chiefs, that Watkins signing, I'm not a huge fan of. I don't like what the Chiefs have done, actually. They've made a couple of other moves. It seems like the teams that have been active have been very active. And then there's a few teams sitting around not doing much, including your usual suspects like the Steelers. Oddly, my lot, the Bucks, not active. Free agency, they have been very much so the last few years. But no, they're keeping themselves quiet now. Who was it they signed? They signed a linebacker from the Cowboys, Anthony Hitchens, which I think is a strange move because they lost Derek Johnson. They've already got Reggie Ragland there. But I think Hitchens and Ragland are very similar players. They're kind of, like Williamson was for the Titans. Like, they're good run pluggers, but they're not very good. That's being generous in pass coverage. So I'd worry about that, especially considering coverage was an issue for the Chiefs last year. They've lost Marcus Peters. They kind of got worse in that area. Other receiver contracts. Here's one I like. Well, not necessarily like, but I think it's perfectly reasonable. John Brown, who you're a big fan of when he's healthy.
Yeah.
He's gone to the Ravens for $1 million. 1 year, $5 million.
Yeah, the Ravens get yet another Cardinals receiver.
Yeah, I mean, he basically will replace Mike Wallace, who's still on the market. And if he can just stay healthy, I think he's a big upgrade there. It's just there's no risk for the Ravens here. This is all upside. This is the kind of contract I like. Similar kind of contract to that, we've got Dante Moncrief. He's going to the Jags on a 1 year, $7 million deal. I don't like this one as much because I think Brown is a better player than Moncrief when Brown is healthy. I mean, Moncrief we've seen have only one good year, I think, in his time in the league, and that was when Luck was thrown to him. And frankly, I think Luck could make me a 500-600 yard receiver. So I'm not a huge fan of that one, but the Jags did need to bring somebody in. This is the Ravens' crazy one. Ryan Grant of the Redskins. Are you familiar with who that is?
No, I don't think so.
No, I wouldn't expect you to be. I would imagine most NFL fans are not familiar with who he is. He got a 4 year, $29 million deal with the Ravens, play wide receiver. I had to check this across the internet because it doesn't make any sense to me at all. There's a guy who has done, let me see, his best season was last year. He had 45 catches for 570 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Okay.
That's worrying. That's a weird signing. That I just have to mention it because it's so weird. This is where the receiving stuff went a bit nuts. The Dolphins signed Danny Amendola to a 2-year deal for 12 mil, which is odd because Danny Amendola only turns up in the playoffs, and I don't see the Dolphins getting there. Marquise Lee for the Jags, who I think is a mid-tier number 2 receiver, 4 years, 38 mil with 18 guaranteed. Don't particularly like those numbers. I think he's an okay player, but this is not the year to be signing a wide receiver. Paul Richardson, the Seahawks receiver, has made some real highlight reel type plays last year and in the playoffs in 2016. 5 years, 40 mil. I mean, you're paying a guy who's got maybe 50 catches in the NFL.
People are desperate, man.
I know things are thin at the receiver position. Albert Wilson, the number 2 receiver for the Chiefs the last couple of years, 3 years, 24 million from the Dolphins. The Dolphins don't even need receivers. I honestly, I've got no idea what the Dolphins are doing this offseason. They look awful right now. That is a team that's gone backwards for sure. And Allen Robinson, this contract I don't mind, but I'm not a huge fan of it. Allen Robinson, 3 years, 42 mil, 25 guaranteed. To go to the Bears. He's coming off an ACL. That's my big concern with it. If he's healthy, I think he's worth it. Gives them a number 1. They needed a receiver bad. And considering the money that went to some of these other guys, it looks like great value. But yeah, this year was the year to be a free agent wide receiver. I think that's the conclusion from that little segment. A lot of teams throwing a lot of money at some really mediocre players. Like I said, I was looking at the numbers for Mike Evans for the Bucks. I was like, maybe the Bucks could have worked a bit harder to get a better deal. I feel a lot better about it at this point because those are pretty horrific. I still can't believe the Ryan Grant one. None of it makes sense to me. Drew Brees is staying with the Saints. We're not going to dwell on that one too much. We expected that. I think what was it we said? We said it was never a possibility he was going to realistically leave. It turned out to be the case. Other big signings: the Titans. Arnie's not here, which is a shame because I'm sure he'd be happy to talk these. They've made a couple of moves. One of them I'm quite a fan of, the Malcolm Butler signing. He's got a 5-year, 61 mil with 30 mil in guarantees deal. Yeah, I don't think it's the best value.
I do actually remember. I think Arnie actually said something about the Titans signing Malcolm Butler this.
He's probably made a post about it in the group.
No, I think he mentioned it on the show at one point.
Oh, what? That he thought this was something that would happen?
Yeah, I think he said he thinks the Titans are going hard after Malcolm Butler. And
yeah, again, you're cutting out on my end. I don't know what's going on with your mic today, man.
Yeah, I just blame you.
Yeah, Butler. This makes a degree of sense. I think if they're planning on running the same kind of scheme they have the last couple of years, he's played with Logan Ryan in the past. And they've got a bit of a sort of Patriots link in that front office, so I think they've probably got a better idea than some teams what they're getting. It's not a horrific contract when you look at the money corners are getting. So I'm okay with this. The Titans needed a corner. They got one that can step in immediately. So I think this isn't a bad deal for them. So I'll give them a thumb up for that one. However, the Dion Lewis signing, another Patriot they've brought in, I'm a little bit dubious about. Now, I like Lewis. I think he's a great option when he's healthy. He's a good runner, and he's exceptional in the passing game, which Derrick Henry most certainly is not. So they should be a good combination. I just don't like the money. 4 years, 20 mil for a running back who has never been able to stay healthy, even when he's been part of a backfield by committee. it's a bit iffy. It does improve this team. I would have liked to have seen a better looking deal in terms of numbers. I mean, it's a bit concerning. Corners will kind of stick to, because that's another one of the markets that's been pillaged. If you need a corner, you're not going to find one of the top guys now. They are all gone. Again, a mixed bag like the receiver group. Chicago Bears signing Prince Amukamara, 3 years, 27 mil. I like this deal a lot. He's been a free agent in the last couple of years because, again, he's one of those players who just can't stay healthy. But last year, stayed somewhat so, and once again played quite well. So they've invested in him a little more. I'm sure there's probably some outs built into this contract in case of future injury. But if he can play enough over these 3 years, I'm sure he'll prove to be worth it. So I think that's a decent deal. They keep him in the building. Brashard Breeland, 3 years, 24 mil, 11 guaranteed to the Panthers. It's a bit more money than I'd like because he's been inconsistent in his time with the Redskins. But again, they needed a player after trading away Daryl Worley earlier on in the week. So I'm sure he'll be starting. Lions re-signed Nevin Lawson, 2 years, 10.3 mil. Don't understand this. He was terrible last season. So I don't know. Not a lot of years in it, I guess. The Rams re-signed Nickel Roby-Coleman to a 3 year, 15 mil deal, which I think is a great deal. He's a really good nickel cornerback. They traded for Aqib Talib. They've got Marcus Peters. And they now have a guy that can play in the slot and be a designated role for him, and he'll play well. He's played in this scheme for a year now. I thought he played solidly for them. Great deal for the Rams. Their secondary looks absolutely stellar going into next year. I think they could easily be one of the best groups in the league. And there's a couple more. The Jets signing Maurice Claiborne, Tremaine Johnson, formerly of the Rams, to a deal, not sure how long yet it's for yet, but 15 mil a year. Man, that is a lot of money to be handing out to Johnson. He is a good player, but does he make the Jets that much better? I'm not sure. The Bucks re-signed Brent Grimes to a 1 year deal for 10 mil. If he can continue to play, and the question here is simply age, then it's perfectly reasonable. The Bucks had to do something because they've got nothing at the position. And Richard Sherman is now a Niner. Have you heard the details of this deal, Dan?
I just thought it was a flat, like, X amount. I think it was over a couple of years.
Oh, no. This one, Sherman was representing himself in these negotiations, and I think John Lynch kind of won.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little bit.
Well, yeah,
so it's a 3 year deal with $3 million guaranteed. And it's worth potentially 39 mil. But that is reliant on Sherman being an all-pro.
Seriously?
Getting all of that money, yeah. Sherman has to play and play well. Otherwise, the Niners basically have him for peanuts. I mean, he's betting on himself.
Yeah, but why didn't he just have an agent?
Doesn't want to pay the agent's fees. Bear in mind, the last couple of players who did this actually did really well for themselves.
Maybe.
Sherman is being very Richard Sherman about this, taking the ultimate risky deal.
It's not just that, he's purposely.
If it pays off,
purposely gone to the.
Well, yeah,
I don't think it's division.
Well, I think it's reasonable because the Niners could be quite competitive next year. And yeah, he's a West Coast guy. Bear in mind, he went to Stanford. So I don't think he was ever realistically going to leave the West Coast. And he gets to stick it to the Seahawks. Like, I think he's happy to do all of those things. It's the most Richard Sherman thing in the world. Bet on himself. Be somewhat spiteful to his former team.
Yeah, just a shame he didn't come to Arizona. That would have been silly. Patrick Peterson and Richard Sherman.
Yeah, that's true. But then if he had played well, then the Cardinals wouldn't be able to pay him.
No.
That was an interesting one. And then, but I think this is a really great move for the Niners. I mean, the lack of risk on their side is incredible. Because frankly, if Sherman is making all that money, then like he'll have been worth it.
Yeah, because he would have performed.
Yeah, and it's the all pro team.
And Sherman's basically given himself an incentive to perform well.
Going to be fascinating to see how it goes. The Chargers, they made the best deal here. Casey Hayward, who has been exceptional for the last couple of seasons since initially coming over from Green Bay. He got a 3-year, $36 million deal, $20 million guaranteed. That is a bargain. That's like it's similar actually in numbers to what Butler's getting, but Hayward has been a better player than Butler for the last couple of years. Hayward's been like one of the top 6 or 7 corners in the league. He's been exceptional. So, yeah, I think that and the Butler deal are probably the 2 best value of all. Possibly with Amu Kamara in there. They're the ones I quite like. The Sherman one as well. But I think this Hayward deal is absolutely exceptional. I really thought there'd be a team that would go after him hard, but it seems he was pretty happy to just stay in LA with the Chargers. So, yeah. Oh, and the Rams signed Sam Shields as well from the Packers. He's been a good corner in the past. I don't know how well he'll be able to play at his age, but it's just more depth. So yeah, that Rams team, they've got all the corners in the world apparently. So yeah, right, we're gonna start wrapping up shortly. So I'm just gonna scan through and see if anything has happened since we started recording this.
No.
There was the Carlos Hyde deal. So Carlos Hyde's going to the Browns, where I suspect he'll end up backing up Saquon Barkley. But if not, if he can stay healthy, he's a good option. The money there didn't look too bad either. Going through all the transactions. I think we got the majority. Trey Burton. Do you remember who Trey Burton is? The guy who made the tight end throw for the Eagles?
Nope.
Well, he's gone to the Bears. 4 years, $32 million. I can't believe they've given him that much money because he's not really done all that much. He played quite well when Zach Ertz was hurt. I guess it's just a case of the Bears needed weapons. The guy's shown some upside. The Jags signing Andrew Norwell, who was, for me, the top player available in all of free agency. Is now the highest paid guard in the league, 5 years, $66.5 million. Apparently, he was going to New York. The Giants, apparently that was a done deal. It sounds like the Jags came along at the last minute and basically blew them all out of the water. He's a really good run blocker. He's in his prime. Clearly, this team is just going to lean even more heavily on Leonard Fournette next year. I think it's a good deal just because of it fits this Jags team. They're not going to be great on the outside. They're going to need to be good in the trenches. Build much like the Eagles have done over the last couple of years. It makes them a better team. So I approve of that. The guard market is the one that's probably been the least touched in the league so far. Teams have been keeping away from the trenches thus far early in free agency. As you can tell by the players we've kind of read out, there's been a heavy emphasis on bringing in players on the outside. So we've still got guys like Justin Pugh and Josh Sitton, who are Pro Bowl caliber interior linemen on the market. Sheldon Richardson still on the market as well. Yeah, I believe that's everyone. So there's those guys I just mentioned. Dontari Poe, he's still out there. Zach Brown, who has been really good for the Redskins. You might remember him, Dan, as the guy who was fast but not very good for the Titans for a couple of years. Mohamed Wilkerson's gone to the Packers. 1 year, $5 million plus $3 in incentives. That is a great deal because if they can get a good version of Mohamed Wilkerson that cares, him and Mike Daniels with who's the Kenny Clark in the middle. That could be one of the best D lines in the league. Just who knows with Wilkerson after the last couple of seasons. Jimmy Graham's also gone to the Packers. Do you think he'll be a success there?
Well, with Aaron Rodgers, anything is possible.
Yeah, it's been after that Martellus Bennett thing didn't work out. Other than that, he's not really had anyone to throw to. A couple of safeties on the market. Kenny Vaccaro, I'm not a fan of at all. Eric Reed got some medical issues. Avery Williamson going to the Jets. And Nigel Bradham's re-signed with the Eagles.
Also, it's not been confirmed whether Tyrann Mathieu actually definitely 100% re-signed.
Well, nothing's been confirmed yet. We do have to all bear in mind also that this is the tampering period. Nothing official until, I think, 3 o'clock Eastern, or is it 1 o'clock Eastern?
Yeah, this is suddenly where Kirk
Cousins... 4 o'clock Eastern time today.
Where Kirk Cousins suddenly turns around and goes, yeah, guys, I was just having jokes. I signed with the Browns. They're paying me $100 million.
You can dream. So there we have it. So from what you've heard there, Dan, what team do you think has got better? We'll go about compulsory early winner and loser of free agents.
I'll actually be honest, no one.
The Rams have made a lot of changes. Do you think they've improved? I mean, the secondary now looks exceptional.
I suppose the Rams are definitely the biggest improved, but I want to see it once it's all finalised. Because there seems to be a lot of money being thrown around from teams that I know are dodgy with cap room, so I don't know what's happening. And I want to see who releases who. It's not been, definitely confirmed yet. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, once Sue is officially released, that will be the biggest name on the market. I have no idea where he could end up.
In Arizona. God help us.
That would be interesting.
We don't have the money to pay him. It's not a worry.
Well, when you look at the deal we had with the Dolphins, I don't think anyone's going to pay him like that, especially considering his age at this. I have no idea where he ends up. That's a really tough one. Especially, well, I mean, it's tough because no one has shown any interest in these. There's a lot of defensive tackles on the market at the minute. Sheldon Richardson, Benny Logan, Dontari Poe. It's actually one of the better positions in free agency at the moment. The problem is all these guys have some question marks. They're either just pure run stuffers or they're inconsistent. Two, obviously the most talented of them, but how much do you want to pay him? And how much is he worth at this point? I'm not sure. In terms of me, this free agency, I'd say early winner, and I always hate to say you've got one at this point. I really do like what the Browns have done. I think they've put themselves into a position where they've got more flexibility in this year's draft, and they've acquired some actual proven NFL talent pools, which they need on that offensive side of the ball. And as for a team that I think has gone backwards, I mean the Dolphins. To lose Sue and Landry, and you're talking Pro Bowl caliber players at their position. And they kind of had no choice in terms of the cap situation, but to allow it to get to that point and then make some of the signings they've made, particularly at wide receiver, Albert Wilson and Danny Amendola on the kind of money they're on, doesn't make much sense to me. They bought in Richard Quinn, who I like as a player, but his contract isn't great.
Yeah, but the Dolphins have been going backwards for a couple of years now.
Well, they had that last year. They made the playoffs. They went, one step forward, and then their quarterback's knee explodes, and they signed Jay Cutler. Oh, and Nate Solder is going to the Giants. Did forget to mention that. She's like the best O-lineman they've had in years, which isn't necessarily saying much, but he was very good once he got healthy last year. But that is that. That was quite the vocal workout in the end. Anything else you want to discuss this week before we wrap this up? Okay, cool. Well, we'll get something done next week. I'm back at work, so we'll have to figure out a time for it. But yeah, we'll be back as per. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, it's been a pleasure. Check out some more of the stuff if you want to see some of the opinions that we've had on free agency as a whole this year, as well as players coming out in this year's draft. From the last couple episodes, there's been a lot of talk of that stuff. And next week will probably be a breakdown of the rest of free agency, because there's still a lot of names out there, and we'll start looking ahead to the draft a little bit. So thanks for watching as always. It's been a pleasure. Have a great one, and go Bucks.